I'm Hannah.
And I'm Matt Hanna.
And this is Horror Hour with the Hannas,
where we discuss your favorite scary movies.
So for today's episode, our very first, we are discussing Insidious. The reason we picked Insidious for our first episode is because it was actually the first horror movie that I had ever seen. So it held a special place in my heart, and I thought it would be a fun way to get things started.
And what age was that?
I think I was like 15, like a sophomore in high school, because I am a huge chicken shit. I actually, the first day I watched Insidious, earlier that day, I had cried from fear watching Coraline.
Oh, okay.
So that's...
Yeah, you didn't really start watching them until we started dating.
Yeah. I really didn't like horror movies until we started dating. You made me watch a couple, and I still didn't like them. And then I think it was Nightmare on Elm Street that really, brought me in. Did
you like Insidious when you watched it the first time?
I actually did.
But you didn't continue watching horror movies after that?
No, I was still too chicken. And I, watched it with other people, so that helped. I saw another horror movie, a year later that was bad, that scared the crap out of me. So I've just always been kind of a chicken. I've definitely gotten along.
Which one was that?
Mama. So, not even a good movie. I still have nightmares about that for some reason, and I've watched way scarier.
Was that actually its name?
Yeah, it's called Mama. Yeah.
Was it with the feral kids in the woods?
Yeah.
Okay.
That one.
All right.
So anyway, not talking about Mama, I'm talking about Insidious. So we kind of covered my experience with the movie. It was the first horror movie I saw. I saw it around age 15, and I've definitely seen it. It's probably the horror movie I've seen the most amount of times. What about you?
With Insidious, I was a James Wan fan, but I don't think I actually watched Insidious until college. I think you actually made me watch it.
I probably did.
When I had seen The Conjuring, I'd seen the Saw movies. But Insidious I just never got around to. And in case we didn't say, this came out in 2011, directed by James Wan.
Written by Lee Wynell.
Who also wrote Saw.
And yeah, they have that partnership. Starring Patrick Wilson, Rose Byrne, and Barbara Hershey.
And some kids.
Yeah, who are barely in it. Which, love that for them. But if we want to get started with a 15-second summary.
Sure. Do you want to go first?
No, you're going to go first.
I'm going to go first?
Yeah.
Okay. You have a timer ready?
Yeah, hold on.
Okay.
Let me grab a timer. I was not that prepared, but...
Oh, do we want to... We can also talk about what we think about this movie before we saw it. No? Okay.
No, I had a very specific order of things.
Okay, that's fine.
You told me I was in charge of that.
Okay.
So I don't know if we'll keep this in, but Matt's clearly a dummy.
No, I'll keep it in.
This is our dynamic. Me, prepared. Matt, ruining Matt. Okay, here's your 15-second summary. Go.
Patrick Wilson is a bad dad who has a bunch of trauma and has never learned to cope with it, so he doesn't teach his son to cope with it. So his son gets caught in the further and can't get out because he never learned how to.
That was perfectly 15 seconds.
All right.
I have a bone to pick about your summary because... he's not the best dad, but it's mostly because he has so much trauma.
Oh, yeah, but give me 15 seconds.
Present, so, I don't know. My summary...
You timing it?
It's less than 15 seconds.
Oh, okay.
I can summarize it with a single quote from the movie. It's not the house that's haunted, it's your son.
Oh, so you went with a fun one.
That's my whole summary.
Okay.
Yeah, I came prepared. I probably won't do that all the time, but I think that quote is so... One, I love how it's delivered. I think it's done really well. I think it captures the theme of the movie and what makes it different from a normal haunted house movie.
We'll get into that, I guess.
Yeah, so just right off the bat, before we get into too many thoughts on the movie, we are going to discuss how many times I actively hid behind my hands, behind a blanket, behind my sweatshirt, how many times one of us actively screamed, and how many times one of us panic laughed or exclaimed some sort of curse word.
All right, you kept track of that?
Yeah, I did. So, I hid a total of 6 times throughout this movie. I'm sure if I hadn't seen it, it would have been the whole movie. But I managed only to hide 6 times. Total scream count was 5 between the 2 of us. And I either panic laughed or yelled oh shit, or oh fuck, a total of 8 times, which I thought I was doing really well. And then there were just a couple scenes I totally forgot about and just yelled like balls.
We should just count that as a scream.
I don't know. It felt different. Whatever. But, so I thought it was, like, it's not the scariest movie I've seen. It's not the movie that makes me the most uncomfortable. I've certainly have others that, like, leave me feeling really uncomfy or panicked. But overall, it does pack a punch. Like, it is scary.
Yeah, it definitely has its moments. I would say prior to us watching this, I was kind of, like, dreading it, not because it's scary, but because I actually, like, before watching this was like, you know what, I don't love this movie.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, also we're going to get into spoilers here. I would say it did not grow on me anymore this time. There's some great moments.
Yeah.
And I think just a really atrocious third act, or at least just a section in the third act that
I agree.
really, really bogs it down. But I'll talk about the things this movie does good.
Can I interrupt you real quick?
Sure.
I would say this time around, like every time, I enjoyed myself. I think I have like a lot of nostalgia for it though, since it was like my first horror movie. It's the first one I ever like watched all the way through
and people love this
enjoyed
movie.
it. And people love this movie.
I think I'm just cranky.
I definitely get why people love it. It is really fun. Would I say it's my favorite? Would I say I've seen better that came out in the last year? 100%. Will I watch this again in the future and enjoy my time? Yes.
You know what? I'm gonna be sad, but I think it's my least favorite James Wan movie of the ones I've seen.
It is certainly not my least favorite, and we'll definitely cover my least favorite at some point. It's on our list.
Mm-hmm.
So I won't spoil it now, but I will be saying it when we cover that movie.
And that's a movie I love. It's Malignant. Yeah. I love Malignant.
Screw you. I was trying to keep it close to the chest. Yeah, I understand what Malignant's going for, and it's supposed to be camp, but it's not for me. But Insidious. Do agree, though, that the third act is piss poor in comparison to the rest of the movie. I just, don't find the scenes in the further. I think they look kind of bad. I don't love the look of the lipstick demon. Like, when they actually show it, I don't find it that scary. And I think that's the case for a lot of horror, right? Or, creature features. Just once you see the creature, it becomes a lot less scary. I think there's only a couple movies that I found that I actually was scared once I saw it, and this is not one of them.
I still feel scared of the shark in Jaws. I think the mechanical shark's scarier than a real shark.
My example that I thought of off the top of my head is I love A Quiet Place because I'm a John Krasinski stan, and I think
the creatures
are fun. Like, they don't ruin the scare for me once I see them. But
until every single creature in that era looked exactly the same.
Yeah, that's the problem.
Yeah.
But
let's talk about
the good
I want to
stuff.
talk about things this movie does well.
Yeah, go for it.
And the first thing I'm looking at my notes that makes me laugh is I feel like I heard people complain that Patrick Wilson is kind of like wooden in this, but I felt that was exactly what he was supposed to be doing, and that his bad acting maybe was or what people would call bad acting in quotes was more of a choice, as he was trying to convey this completely detached person, because it was clear that he was just super avoidant of his problems, and from the opening scene of the movie, it's clear that he's almost an absent father. You have mom running around doing everything for those kids, and he's still in bed, gets up, goes to work, and then lies about staying late to grade tests.
I think that performance, again, could come across, like you said, as just kind of boring, or he's just not doing anything with his performance. But I do think it's extremely deliberate. I think the choice of him being so not present is, one, it's clearly written in the script, and two, I think it kind of adds to the total overall meaning that I think I got from it, which was about our coping skills and our trauma over time, and I definitely want to elaborate on that further, but I think he's doing a fine job. I think Rose Byrne is crushing it, and Rose
Byrne's that's mom. The mom.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah,
and
she's
I think
good.
Barbara Hershey, who is Elise, she's the psychic.
She's fantastic.
She crushes. No one holds a candle to what she's doing, in my opinion.
I wrote,
and all of the
my note?
Best quotes from the movie are said by her, such as the one I started off with, "It's not the house that's haunted, it's your son."
My note specifically says Elise kind of killing it given this goofy ass dialogue.
Yeah.
Yeah, she was doing George Lucas dialogue in this movie.
Yeah, I mean, the dialogue in the movie can be extremely corny, but
sometimes I think that this is
it's
Wan.
In service of
it's like what we said with Malignant, which is camp. I think Wan just wants to be very goofy, and is almost the first movie's kind of serious and the first half of the movie's kind of serious and the second half is kind of goofy.
Yeah.
I feel like he's at his best when he's either full serious or like full goofy in this like, nah, that's not even a good way to say it. When he blends it well, it works really well. When it's like separated like this is what it doesn't really work for me, if that makes sense. But I don't know. I mean, the Elise lines were hilarious and like good, and she
was crushing it. She was crushing.
But the other thing this movie does well is I'd say the camera work and the way the camera work lends itself to the scares. Like they purposely, and I kept commenting, like every shot is a close shot. Not every, but every shot of people is like a close shot to the point of where they're just cutting off like portion of their head. They're cutting it weird at the neck. There's like breaking a couple different film rules in ways that have me like wanting to know what's off screen. They do these weird POV shots where it's like the field of view is so much smaller than it should be, so much smaller than like what an actual person's is. So I'm always concerned on what's right off of the screen and builds this tension. And then what they get you with is when they actually do have the scare, they just leave it. It's center right frame, there. Just facing you. And it'll be there on the screen for a couple seconds. And it is like, that's what truly scares me is when something's just like in frame staring at you. The problem, and I hate to go into what I don't like already, but is they do these dumbass audio stings. And it bothered me. And it's like, I was scared already. I was already scared. Okay. Like it got me. And then all of a sudden it's like, I'm double scared on this dumb sting that then takes me out of it when it was like more scary. If I'm standing in my room and somebody's standing in my door frame. Your roll, pal. Sorry, I'm getting excited. I'm standing in my door frame and there's no audio sting, but I'm going to shit my pants if some dark figure is staring at me through a door as I'm like laying in bed. That's way scarier.
100%. But I do feel like there are choices like the audio stings, or there was like a ton of like footage of the outside of the house that just like, at first we were like, that does not need to be there. But I kind of think that those are intentional cliches. One, again, we're talking about King of Camp, James Wan.
King of Camp? Yeah. Somebody's going to come at you for saying that.
Yeah, no, they're certainly campier. But yeah,
Sam Raimi stands. Come on.
True.
Come at her.
But I do feel like the stings are an intentional cliche. This is a movie that starts off just being a classic haunted house movie. And so, to me, I think it works to use a stereotypical horror soundtrack or like stereotypical stings. And I also think for me, it works with all the shots of the house. It kind of makes the house a character, only for later you to find out that, again, it's not the house that's haunted, it's your son. So I kind of feel like it's lending itself to the haunted house trope, so it didn't bother me all that much. And I don't know. I would have been scared either way, yeah, but I do think it might be serving a purpose. But I also didn't do the sound design for this movie, and I'm not James Wan.
Yeah, so I do wonder where the audio sting started, because I'm not sure if I honestly can't remember them being in a lot of my old slashers that I like, but I'm sure they are. Maybe they're just done in a way that don't distract me nearly as much.
I think they sound cool, so I was just kind of like unfazed.
Sure.
Do most of my favorite horror movies not have stings?
I just need more Tiny Tim instead of audio stings.
Okay.
That's way scarier to just play Tiny Tim and have ghosts run around.
Yeah, so we're kind of been all over the place.
Oh, I apologize.
But Tiny Tim is probably... So when we say Tiny Tim, we mean there's a specific scene where Rose Byrne goes outside to take out the trash, and she leaves her record player playing like classical music or like some just relaxing music. And when she's outside, it switches to Tiptoe Through the Tulips by Tiny Tim. And there's just like a small child dressed as like a sailor dancing in her home, who she sees, and then follows him into another room, and he like is in there, and it's like a ghost. And I
was about to say, you didn't make it clear it was a ghost.
Yeah, it's a ghost. Like, it's not one of her kids. It's not a random neighborhood child. It is a ghost. And that has to be one of my favorite scenes in the movie, because for some reason it disturbs me by far the most. I don't know if it's the song choice that just really gets to me. I
think part of it is she's been alone this whole time. Like, Patrick Wilson doesn't experience any of it until later, because he's not home, because he's an absent father.
So avoidant.
But it's like they purposely have the scares happening to her.
Yeah, it's very deliberate, I think, that he doesn't experience a single haunt until the third act of the movie. He doesn't experience a single haunt until they call in Elise, the psychic, into the house.
And even then he doesn't believe it.
And then he doesn't believe it until they, sit down to do...
And that's part of the avoidant thing, again, is, like, even when his wife is, like, begging for help, eventually he's like, okay, fine, I'll help you out, but, like...
He doesn't
even then he doesn't believe it, and so they're trying to like isolate her. That's probably why that scene is scary too, is like she's just the one constantly being haunted, right, having these things happen, and then he just thinks she's crazy and she feels almost crazy.
One of my other favorite scenes is when the baby monitor, it's I think the first real like haunting scene of the movie is when they are... or she's home, the baby's upstairs, she's playing piano, and over the baby monitor, she starts hearing this voice whisper, and she is like, what the fuck is that? And as she's listening, she hears it scream, I want it now. And then she runs up to the baby's room, and there's nothing there. So one, I think this scene is really well done, because you don't actually see anything, and it's just a concept that I think is scary.
Yeah.
Like, hearing any kind of weird noise in your home when you're home alone is terrifying, especially if you think it's in your child's room. I can't imagine almost anything scarier than thinking your child is in danger. And then, in retrospect, I also love that the voice says, I want it now, because that... At first, I was just like, oh, he's just a scary man. But it's even that is in service of the plot. Like, I want it now. He's probably referring to the kid's body.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. Yeah.
I love that scene. I think those two, Tiptoe Through the Tulips Kid and that are my favorites. Did you have any particular favorite scenes?
Oh, yeah, I wrote mine down. There was one that stood out to me, and it was the seance scene, I would call it. And I felt that one just like all around had like really incredible like craftsmanship and was like it's Juan at his best. So what happens in that scene is they have Elise in there and they want to talk to... Well, actually, I think they're trying to talk to the son. I have no idea what his name is.
Dalton.
So they're trying to talk to Dalton while he's in his coma, but he's really in the further. Whatever that is, where all the ghosts are. And they bring in this awesome prop, and I love it. I don't know, I'm a sucker for this.
The gas mask?
She wears the gas mask, and she whispers through the gas mask into Lee Whannell's ear, and he's writing things down that are being said to her. So at first she's talking to Dalton, and it's like normal, and then all of a sudden the demon, whoever it is, comes in and takes over. And the room just starts going nuts. The lights are flashing, the camera flashes are going off for like the heat signatures, whatever they're doing with the ghost hunting stuff. She's shaking. He's writing all this like this stuff just super fast, all this like gross different things that the monster, the ghost, or the demons are saying to him. And then Dalton is just not in his bed anymore. It like either flatlines or whatever. I think he flatlines, and then he's standing at the table, smacks the table. Everyone goes flying, and then all the ghosts, who I think the ghost design is cool, where it's actually just normal looking people for the most part, start flooding the room because there's this like link barrier. What am I saying? There's a barrier between the further and our world, and it breaks. And really just like this intense, like fast cut scene that I found to just be so fun. And honestly, this was like, I think my favorite scene in the movie. And then right after this is when we get into the third act that we both really dislike, which is, I think, very disappointing.
What about that scene made it your favorite? Like the plot points or the way it was edited?
I think it's the way it was edited and acted. I think it's just a good set piece is what I would call it. Like we're in the room, we're all of them are around the table. We're at like a pretty intense moment. And then they meet it with this just like building intensity of a scene, like faster cuts, flashing lights. The scribbles that Lee Whannell's writing down get like more frantic and scary, and we don't exactly know what Elise, the medium, is saying. She's like whispering and almost through the gas mask as he's listening, and then it just like all comes to a climax with Dalton smacking the table, everyone going flying, and the ghosts all starting to come into the room until she eventually like shakes Dalton out of it. It tells them like leave this place, leave this boy, and then things go back to normal, and he goes back into his like coma. I think it's just it's the craftsmanship of the scene, like everything about it, the camera movement, editing, the cutting, the
really
lighting,
cool. And the lighting like flashing is cool. Honestly, though, I think they just were like, this gas mask is scary, so we have to work it in somehow because I don't know what purpose it's.
I love a good gas mask.
but I loved it. She looked great. Barbara Hershey,
It was so good.
again, crushing it.
Maybe
with
it's just
her
the gas
line
mask that I like it.
choices, with her fashion statements.
Yeah.
Truly an icon.
Yeah, she's
like
bomb.
the standout performer in this movie for me personally.
And then unfortunately, we go right from that to an extended scene with Patrick Wilson running around the further, which happens to only be just a little bit grayer than the world they're living in, considering that entire movie is just gray on gray.
Yeah, so the whole movie, like, we tried not to talk about it too much because we wanted our discussion to kind of be saved for the podcast. But Matt did repeatedly complain about the editing, like the coloring
it's the
of the
coloring,
movie.
yeah,
I don't know why I said edit, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Like the cinematography, the coloring of the movie. The filter that they used was kind of like gray, kind of sepia.
Which I think was the trend at the time for horror movies, so I can't blame
you've seen
them.
Twilight. The whole movie is fucking blue.
But they're in like a rainy area in Twilight.
It's
at least.
still too blue.
It's bad.
It should not
They
be
were in
happening.
LA. You'd look at these houses. It was like clearly like palm trees, like California house.
It's a horror movie. It shouldn't look happy.
I know. I'm a big fan of like the contrast of like daytime being
100%.
like nice.
I'm
just,
not.
like, a little
I'm not
texture to my
saying
films.
I enjoyed the gray. I'm just pointing out how much it killed you the whole movie.
Oh yeah. Then I get to the further. The first thing I said was, "Wow, it's like not that much grayer here."
I do wish that there were more contrast between the real world and the further. I think they tried to do that by making like the further like smoky. Like there was like this like fog effect, but that was really all that they did.
The further looked and felt like a bad haunted house, and I love 100%. A good haunted house. Like I'm talking about like the ones you pay to go to and walk around, and teenagers in masks jump out and scare you. I've been to some good haunted houses, and I've been to some bad. This felt like a bad one, and it was just like looked kind of cheap, had fog and darkness. It was just boring.
I wouldn't say it was boring.
Well, for me,
I feel like it definitely goes on too long, and there are some parts in it that I'm like, I do not care, Patrick Wilson. Get your kid and get the F out. But I do feel like it was interesting to see the other spirits that were supposedly like in the further, potentially haunting Dalton, trying to get to like the bodies and whatnot. I felt like that was interesting, and neither of us have seen the sequels to this movie.
I don't know if I plan to either.
To be in it, like.
Yeah, you're probably right.
I know, like, they're serving a purpose by being there. It doesn't make it overly interesting.
Yeah, and I don't want to complain about, like, plot points and rules in the movies. I feel like that's some CinemaSins garbage.
Yeah.
But, I was like, why are these ghosts just hanging out here?
I also just thought that,
they just seem cranky.
It made it less tense when they were just showing a million
it seemed like that whole
people.
part could have just been cut.
Especially when he's, like, fighting that. There's, like, a scene where he's, like, fighting one of the spirits
the
in the
Licky
further.
Ghost.
And then it keeps showing his body in, like real life, like shaking
seizing,
and stuff. But it goes on for, like, over a minute. And I'm like, we get it.
Yeah,
like, I don't... Like, we know you're going to beat the ghost because we know Dalton has to come back.
Yeah, I said to you earlier, and I know we weren't supposed to talk about it, that I was like, the change I would almost make is like, why... We don't even need to see him in the further, I think. I'm not a filmmaker, so I shouldn't complain too much, but it was like, maybe just show us what's going on in the real world, and like then have that crazy twist at the end, and maybe we don't see everything there. I don't know if that'd be more boring. I feel like that horror movies have this problem where like 3/4 of the way through they have to have some kind of like conflict, and like there has to be some kind of like action happening. And I think Juan's other movie, The Conjuring, handles this really well. I just don't think Insidious handles it very well, because there's no good way to like fight these ghosts in the further and fight the lipstick demon. It just ends up being very like odd and kind of boring.
So something you mentioned there was the big twist at the end. So for those who don't know, I'm assuming if you're listening to this, you've watched the movie, and I know it's a very popular one, so I'm sure you've seen it. But the twist at the end is that the old veiled woman
Ghost.
Yeah.
Just
and
clarifying.
him in the further are like having a disagreement. He's like yelling at her through a mirror in the further, and then she takes
Patrick
his
Wilson,
body.
you mean?
Yes.
Yeah.
And then she takes his body, and no one realizes that she's the one that's now in the body. She then, as Patrick Wilson, the dad, kills Elise, and then Elise gets like a picture that shows that the ghost woman.
Yeah, he took a picture of her, which pissed him off, or her off.
So obviously this is a plot point throughout the rest of the movie. This doesn't just pop up at the end. And the reason why I wanted to, like, pull this piece out and talk about it is because I think it is in service of the overall meaning or purpose of the movie that I see. So again, more background. Apparently, since Patrick Wilson's character, Dad, was a child, he had this veiled spirit woman in the back of his photos. Every photo taken of him, she would get closer and closer. His mom, when he was a child, had called Elise to, get help for the situation. So she's been after him, trying to take his body for his whole life. And so, very relevant to the plot, but I also think it's very relevant for, like I said, what the movie's trying to do. So
and that's what we're going to get into now?
Yeah.
Yep.
If that's cool.
Yeah, that's great.
So I know we talked about earlier that Dad is extremely avoidant, and I think we can argue a lot of times being avoidant is a coping skill that we develop, and it might not be the healthiest one. A lot of people do that, right? Like, we watch a movie because we feel sad. We watch a comedy. But that is also sometimes avoidant.
This dad instead lies about grading papers late and sleeps at his desk while his wife takes care of 3 kids and one of them being in a coma.
Yeah. But I, imagine from what he's gone through as a child, like, he might not remember it because he's repressed the experience.
They said he repressed all of it.
He does not remember any of it.
He doesn't remember the veiled lady in his pictures or anything.
Yeah.
Which was what they said was Mom decided was the only way he could, get through it and to stop taking his picture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So she, helps him repress the situation and basically teaches him that being avoidant is the only coping skill for this situation. So the whole movie, we see Mom doing all the work with the kids. Mom is the only one learning about Dalton's care, the son, when he's in a coma. And then we see conversations between Mom, Rose Byrne, and Patrick Wilson, Dad, where she's like, "You've been coming home late every night." She says, "You're never here. Where are you?" Meaning, not just are you never here in the home, but, where is your head at right now? Because you're not here with me. Because he has been disassociating and repressing everything to the point where he can't even be there, not only physically, but, mentally for her.
We should also say this is something about the movie we both really liked. Was this, subtext going on here? Mm-hmm. So, sorry, continue.
Anything about, a well-done mental health subplot or theming really goes a long way with me. So I thought it was really interesting, and I didn't really have any concerns or problems about what they were doing or what they were saying.
And a lot of horror movies do try to do this, and a lot of them do it poorly. So it's fun when they do something kind of interesting with it and works.
And like we said, Dad misses 100% of the hauntings until Elise gets there, which again I think is in service of this avoidance. He is just not present. He is missing all of these things. But then we get into the generational trauma piece. So not only, did Josh, Dad, Patrick Wilson, I keep calling him all different things. I should probably stick with Dad. Not only when Dad was younger did he have this happening, but we even show that his mom has had dreams and astral projections. She had dreams of something spooky going on in the house. And she trained him in the same service to be avoidant. She even says, I dismissed your stories. I told you to grow up. She hasn't been there for him in the best way. Mm-hmm. And so therefore it makes it really hard for him to be there for his kids. He's the ultimate repression king in this movie, as well as just not the most present parent. And
because he's not there for Dalton, his own kid, who's also astral projecting, he does the same thing, has no idea how to control it, finds himself in a precarious situation, getting locked up in the further because, like I said, Patrick Wilson never taught him to use it. But that's because Patrick Wilson never learned it himself because his mom said repression's the way to go.
Yeah. And, this is something that, frequently happens with individuals who are victims of trauma. We are able to, sometimes we choose to suppress things. We deliberately try and avoid them or not remember them. And some people really do sometimes repress things. I think it's less, it's now psychologically known as less common than we might have thought it was 10 years ago. But, these are real trauma reactions. So I liked that like, I felt like that was a fair portrayal of it. I think it's, like, cool, too, because they even show, like, things like disassociation. There is a scene that even shows that Dalton, the son, has been disassociating from some of his trauma. There is drawings that he made that says, "Last night I watched myself sleep and I flew away." So I think there's like a lot of these really interesting mental health pieces here that at first I would have been like, oh, this is just a play on a haunted house movie, and all they're trying to do is have a fun movie that like deviates from a haunted house genre. But I think they are trying to do more with that.
Yeah, for sure. So what do you think that means for the ending? Because I have my own thoughts, which is that I don't think Patrick Wilson ever did really learn his lesson about like repression and like how to help his family.
And that's how she's able to get in.
He once again, he's in there. And my quote is him just either telling his son or yelling at her that none of this is real. And it's like, homie, this is real. Like, you're in the further.
Isn't that when he
all of this is real. He yells
in the mirror?
Yes, at the mirror. At the veiled lady. He's yelling at her, none of this is real, none of this is real. Which is not true. Once again, trying to step away, trying to avoid. And while he's yelling that, she sneaks to his body, takes it over as he's fighting in the mirror. So I don't think like he learned his lesson about like not repressing these things and learning real coping skills, or better coping skills. And that's why he gets what he gets in the end. Which it's also just fun, and horror movies in the 2010s were extremely mean. That was like the trend at the time, was at the end of all of them, basically the bad guys win. They're pretty cruel in like a fun way. Not my favorite trope, but like you just kind of have to expect it for the time.
And I think it serves as a fun twist too.
Yeah,
like it's just fun no matter what.
There was a period of a bunch of movies at this time, like I think like Drag Me to Hell, and what's the one with Megan Fox?
Jennifer's Body.
Jennifer's Body, I believe, also has like a pretty like mean ending, but it's just what it was at the time.
I just love a good little twisty, so I liked it. But
it is a great twist.
Have to like, I agree with you. I didn't really think about honestly what like the ending was saying. I don't think I remembered that I should get that far and think that through. I guess. But
yeah, because I mean, if we're going to read it as the subtext,
then like the ending,
what does the ending say? Yeah. And I feel like the subtext from opening shot is there.
Yeah. No, it really is right from the beginning. And I think when we're talking about these coping skills too, I think it's important to point out like mom's coping, like mom has a ton of them. Like she has people to talk to. Like she calls people. She asks people for help. Like Patrick, like dad's mom, and Barbara is Elise. I don't know why I said her actress name. But, like, she has these people she's willing to talk to. She's willing to talk about it. She also, in one of the first scenes, they're, like, unpacking their house. And there's a book that says Self-Healing Through Music. And they show her frequently playing music.
She's a musician.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And so I think they laid out, especially with the book being named Self-Healing Through Music, they're making it pretty obvious that she has these coping skills. She has these things to rely on. Like, she's not just relying on avoidance. She's actually trying to, like, make an effort. And he just, like, doesn't have those tools yet.
And he's not going to get them because he's stuck in the further. Unless it happens in the sequels.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, who knows what happens in the sequel because we haven't seen it. And I don't know...
Yeah, I don't know if I'm interested.
I need to.
There's a lot of other better movies out there I want to see. But the fourth one?
The fifth one, Patrick Wilson himself directed.
Oh, and that's one that's coming out. Okay.
So the fact that there are 5 of these confuses the shit out of me. Like, I have no idea. And I know
heard that
some
it gets
of them
complicated.
are prequels.
Yeah, the third one.
I heard the third one's actually pretty good.
Well, it has our girl Elise in it.
Yeah, it's about Elise. So I can get on board with that. I just haven't.
Either way, though, I'm happy. Like, I don't love this movie. I'm happy it was made, though, because I like James Wan, and I want him to keep making stuff. And this was post-Saw, correct?
Yeah, so apparently, and I read this I think I was, like, reading a couple interviews before we recorded. He said that he wanted to do a horror movie without all of the gore and guts of Saw. And so when they were doing this movie, they deliberately edited out some of the things that made it verge into R territory, so it could be spiritually like an opposite project of Saw.
That's hilarious, though, because like the first Saw movie does not have gore and guts in it. It's all off camera.
I know, but
the later ones do. That's a discussion for another day, because we will cover Saw. Because I love that
Saw.
movie. Love James Wan.
So I thought that was interesting. I also thought it was interesting that this movie was made. The initial process cost about like $700,000, which in movie speak is very cheap.
Yeah.
I think the total budget ended up being like $1.5 million or something.
What did they pay Patrick Wilson?
It was a very inexpensive movie. Yeah. So I think that is really fun, and I think, like, looking at it, I would not have been like, oh, they made this movie for under $1 million.
Yeah, I'm pretty shocked by that.
I've seen movies that were filmed for a lot more that are a lot worse. Mm-hmm. So I thought it was fun, and I think, you have to be a good story writer and a good director to be able to pull that off.
For sure, and we know James Wan is.
Yeah. So...
what's next on the agenda?
The only other thing that I had on my little agenda was just rating this movie out of 10.
All right, you want me to go first?
Sure, yeah. You're going to be lower than me.
I'm going to get killed in the comments, or non-existent comments. I was going to give it a 6.
A straight 6.
10, a straight 6 out of 10. It's good. It does a lot of things right. And a 6 out of 10 is good. You got to have plenty of 6 out of 10s out there. Not everything can be a 10.
Yeah.
It's not bad. It's middle of the road for me in terms of like horror movies and movies in general. So come at me, everyone.
When I was watching it, I had a rating in mind, and then talking about it, I want to give it higher, but I think that's like the nostalgia.
That seems cheating.
I know.
This is why we have to record right after.
While I was watching, I said I would give it a 6.9. Okay. Which is nice. Like incredibly arbitrary. I don't know what the decibel really means for me. It's not quite a 7.
That's all right. That's all ratings are arbitrary.
At least that's why they're great. My brain, they are.
Yeah.
You should see my story graph where I rate books. Those ratings mean absolutely nothing. I really like it, but do I really like some of the horror movies I've seen since a lot more? Yes.
Yeah, I mean, The Conjuring is one's
I think The Conjuring is better.
It's fantastic.
And it's the same director.
We gotta do that one at some point, too.
A recent movie that came out that I would give, like, a 10 out of 10, like Barbarian. Like, there are just, like, movies that I think I like a lot more. Well, who knows?
I wouldn't give it a 10, but it's up there. It'd be higher than
maybe
this.
Like a 9.8. Barbarian's, like, my current fave. So there are other things that are kind of campy, kind of silly.
Yeah. Well, so I'm realizing now we never said spoilers. We're not going to do like full movie recaps. We're going right into spoilers. Watch the movie before you listen.
Or don't. Like, do you, man?
You just won't know what we're talking about because we're just going to ramble about things we liked.
And didn't like, apparently.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Half of
plenty of things I didn't like.
Was things you didn't like.
No, this movie does a lot of things right.
I think it's really fun.
It's still a good time. All right, well... You got anything else you want to say? Anything we got to leave the people with?
I just wanted to end by saying thank you to our friends at the podcast Paranormal in Pennsylvania, because they were very encouraging in us starting this process, and we would just like to thank them for giving us a kick in the butt that we needed to get this started, because we've been talking about it for a solid 3 years.
Giving shout-outs already.
Well,
look at us. It's all right. I talked about our comments.
I have a lot of gratitude in my life, and I think it's a healthy coping skill to practice gratitude and to talk, about all the good things that you might have.
We'll see if this audio is even usable.
Yeah, so that's true.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. We appreciate it. This has been Horror Hour with the Hannas, and I'm Matt Hanna.
And I'm Hanna.
See you next time.
Peace.